to a quick video on the Monroe Motivational Sequence. I'm going to go over the format of how that would be done and tailor it more specifically to Keiser University's second speech assignment for your speech course. Let me just pull up the document here. Okay, so you should be able to see now on your screens Monroe Motivational Sequence. So before we even get into the outline, let me just explain a few things about this format that's really important for you to understand. So first of all, topic choice. For this particular format to work, you have to have a real problem and a real solution for your topic. Now, it's very important that you have one problem and one solution. Don't have 2 solutions, 10 solutions, 5 problems. Don't do that, because if you have more than one problem and one solution, by the time you get to the action step, there are so many things that your audience will need to do to be part of the persuasion that it actually will it will drown them in things to do, and they won't then be persuaded. So whatever your topic is, make sure you have a single viable problem and a single viable solution, one of each only one. Also, with that, your problem and solution should not be just a rewording of one another. So for example, let's say your problem that you identify is that there's not enough purple Skittles in a Skittles bag. Well, first of all, that's going to be a terrible topic, because that's not really a problem anyway. So you're starting off on a really bad foot, but let's run with it. Problem: not enough purple Skittles in the Skittles bag. The solution to that, the only solution can be more purple Skittles in the Skittles bag. So really all you've done there is just reworded your problem and solution. This would not be, for this particular format, any good. And the reason it's not good is because when we get into the problem step and the satisfaction step, you're just going to have repetitive content. So we can't have repetitive content. Again, your audience is not going to be persuaded by that. Now, a good choice, oh gosh, there's so many topics we could choose. And I don't mind if you have controversial topics, that's absolutely fine. So let's say we have a problem of mass shootings in America today. I think we can all agree that is a significant problem in America today, mass shootings. A solution to that, a viable solution. I'm not saying it's the only solution. I'm not saying it's the best solution. This is just an assignment, right, for a class. So just meet the parameters of the assignment. But a viable solution to mass shootings could be restriction on gun ownership. Now, some of you are not going to believe in that, and that's absolutely fine. Then choose a different satisfaction. But either way, can you see how the problem of mass shooting and the solution, or satisfaction, as Alan Monroe would say, is gun control? These are 2 very different elements that are obviously highly related. A problem and a solution that is not just a rewording of one another. So this would be a very good and appropriate topic. All right, so now you've got your topic. Now you know it's only one problem and one solution. Let's jump into this outline. So for this outline, please note the instructions. So very much like the informative speech, this is a key sentence outline. And for this outline, I want no more than one complete, grammatically correct sentence per item, unless noted. So for every one of these in red writing, I want you to replace that with a grammatically correct sentence. Only one. If you can count to 1, then you should be good with this. All right? Only one sentence. If you write more than that, you start getting into the realm of scripting. And I don't want you to script, because when you script, very often new speakers will try to memorize those lines or become so reliant on them that because of their nervousness, they end up reading them. So please, no more than one grammatically correct sentence per item, unless otherwise noted. So replace that red writing. So here we go. Title. This is preliminary information, and this makes sure that not only I understand exactly what you're doing, but you as the speaker, do you truly understand what your goals are in this actual speech? Title deals with credibility, so put a catchy descriptive title in. Complete sentence not required. Okay. General purpose, I'm giving it to you. It's in black. You can leave it. I know it's not a complete sentence, but it doesn't need to be for a general purpose. To persuade. That's it. Now, specific purpose and central idea, complete sentences, please. So for the specific purpose, it's what you want your audience to get out of it. And if you remember from the informative speech when I went over that, I mentioned if you start with, at the end of my presentation, I want my audience to, that introductory phrase actually forces you into identifying the specific purpose. And your specific purpose is less generalized as a general purpose, but it is not as direct and concrete as a central idea, which would be the second item here, or well, fourth item technically, the thesis of the speech, right? The central idea. And that's where you're very concrete now, and you identify your main points in the central idea. The purpose really of the central idea is to identify the who, what, where, when, why, and how. At least 4 of those 6 should be sufficient to really narrow down and very concretely tell your audience what the speech is about. Now, this is preliminary information. You will actually only start going over the actual speech itself with the gain attention step. So here is where you will identify the problem. So 5 elements here. I want you to start with an attention getter. Remember, don't start with, hi, my name is Reese. I'm here today to talk to you about blah, blah, blah. It's just boring. You have to compete with the almighty cell phone, and you probably are going to lose against the almighty cell phone. So have an attention getter. That's going to set you up for success. That will make you win. And have an attention getter that does exactly that, gains attention, right? Think of it, I like to think of it as like verbally slapping your audience across their face and really getting them to listen. It obviously has to relate to your topic, because that's very important. It can't be completely random, but it does need to be something that's a little more dramatic, a little more sort of grabbing them, say, you got to listen to this topic. It's really important. So give me one grammatically correct sentence that identifies what the attention getter actually is. Then preview, that's like a topic statement. Just give me the subject of the speech. One sentence, what is it? Relevancy, so critically important, relevancy. Why is this topic important to your audience? Remember, your audience is not there figuring that out. They are just merely sponges at this point in your speech. So you have to tell your audience, no matter how obvious it is to you, the speaker, you have to tell your audience why it is that this topic is relevant to them. Under credibility, introduce yourself and tell us why you are more credible on this topic than your audience. That could be the research that you've done. That could be the years of experience you have on this particular topic, etc., etc. So identify what the credibility is to establish that you are more of an authority than your audience members. And this gives your audience reason to listen to you. And then end off the gain attention step, which is very much like an introductory paragraph or statement, with your position statement. This is your researched opinion, not just your opinion, not your how I feel and think. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything at all when it comes to persuasion. It has to be your researched opinion. And this is very much based in your credibility that you have. So if you're a credible speaker, you've done your research on this topic. Even if you've got 30 years experience in this topic, you still do a lot of research. Experts cite other experts. So give me your researched opinion on the topic and why it needs solving. Just as a footnote here, you are required to have a minimum of 4 cited sources. This would be a great place to put in a cited source that demonstrates your researched opinion. All right, now we're going to transition to the second step of 5 steps that Alan Monroe has, and that is the need step. And we can think of this as part of your body now. So in the need step, this is where you're going to explain what the problem is. There are 3 sentences I want you to write. The first one, very important. It is a problem statement. Here you identify exactly the single problem that you have. Be careful here, because sometimes, especially new speakers, they will put compounding problems on. Well, it's a problem because of this problem, because of that problem. And now you're identifying multiple problems. So be careful that you're only identifying a single problem here. Then clarify this. Give evidence of the problem really existing. A great place, again, to put some sort of cited content in. So you cite an expert. And then illustrate. Very importantly, you tell the audience how this problem directly relates to them. You illustrate why the problem relates to them. Again, in one complete, grammatically correct sentence. So only 3 sentences for that second step, the need step. Now I want you to transition to the third step, satisfaction. And this is basically where you give your solution. And ladies and gents, just as a heads up, remember the appropriate transitions. Many speech authors will say, just put a word or a phrase in there. It's really not enough. It's not enough to bind your structure together. So you really want to have a transition that links the need step now to your satisfaction step. So here you would say, we've clearly identified that mass shooting is a problem. So let's now look at a viable solution. Boom. See how you've now transitioned from one to the next. It's very clear for your audience, where you're basically taking the hand of your audience and you're grabbing it and you're putting them now on this new path, which is the satisfaction path. And this way your audience will keep up with you, the speaker. And remember, audience is hearing this for the first time, not you who's been preparing, practicing. You've done it a lot. You know where you're going. Your audience doesn't necessarily. So this is why you have to be so deliberate in transitioning effectively from section to section, point to point. So, satisfaction step. Here is the solution. And there are 5 items here. Again, very important. Clearly state exactly what your single one solution is. Ladies and gents, it doesn't have to be the world's best solution. It just has to be a solution to your problem. So come up with a viable one, not something that's so abstract we can't see the connection. And look, my advice to you is work smarter, not harder. This is an assignment for a class. So just come up with a solution that you can easily research, you have some basic knowledge on already and so forth. Make it easy for yourself. That's going to be easier to present on. You're not changing the world with this presentation. You're really not. It is just an assignment. So come up with then a single one solution only. Next sentence, explanation. Briefly but in detail. You could spend all 6 minutes of this 6-minute speech on the explanation of your solution, but I don't want you to do that. So here, you're going to be pretty concise, very brief. Just quickly tell me in one sentence, what is the explanation of the solution? Excuse me. And then show the logic behind it in your reasoning. What's the reasoning behind the solution? Tell us how we can make that logical connection. Remember Aristotle, one of his proofs was logos. There it is, right there. These next 2 items are somewhat problematic for many new speakers because they don't quite fully understand these 2. So let me try and give you as easy an explanation as possible. History item really deals with, in many ways, what Aristotle called mythos. That was another one of his proofs that seems to have fallen by the wayside. We don't use mythos as much, but it's actually very, very important. You can think of this history item as historical proof, which is mythos. Historical proof that your solution has actually worked before. So for example, if we're talking mass shootings, solution is restriction on gun ownership, Your history item could very well be on a large scale, right? Because this is not about my uncle, my mother, but no, this is too small scale. It's got to be more historical in its significance. Australia, in the 80s, had their first mass shooting. It was horrible, horrible mass shooting. And within months, they changed gun ownership laws. And since then, they haven't had a mass shooting. You can even use more recently in New Zealand that had their first mass shooting just a few years ago. And again, within months, they changed laws, and since then have not had another mass shooting. So the laws of changing gun ownership clearly have a direct solution to the problem of mass shootings. We've seen this historically before. There is historical precedence. So make sure your history item is global in its perspective. In other words, there is historical proof of it. And it's not about, well, my grandmother once told me to stop having guns and blah, 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 or something like that. This personal history is not good enough. It has to be more global, more large scale, okay? Another wonderful opportunity for cited sources. Not to the other side is really where you acknowledge the counter argument. You're obviously going to have, anytime you give a persuasive speech, people in your audience, especially a topic that's a little more controversial, people in your audience who are not going to buy into your persuasion, buy into your solution, for example. This is your opportunity to acknowledge the primary counter argument, and by acknowledging it, you kind of brush it aside. You say, look, it's not really a problem, right? And because you've acknowledged it. So for an American audience, and not to the other side of this particular topic of mass shootings, restriction of gun ownership, is your right to bear arms, your Second Amendment right. Well, restricting gun ownership doesn't mean you cannot have a gun, own a gun. It's restricting the type of gun you can own. So therefore, your Second Amendment rights actually are not being trodden on. So what you're doing is very quickly, you're acknowledging that primary counter argument that most people would have. You'd have to imagine what that would be. And you just very quickly disarm it, no pun intended, right? You do away with that argument. Do not spend much time on this. The counter argument is not your focus of this speech. Quite the contrary, actually. So don't spend a lot of time, but make sure you do bring up that counter argument. Now you're going to transition into the fourth step, according to Alan Monroe, and that's the visualization. Now, ladies and gents, the visualization step has nothing to do with visual aids. So even though one of the requirements of this assignment is that you have 3 visual aids, this is probably not where you want to put one. Not necessarily anyway. Visualization is all about cognitive motivation. It has nothing to do with visual aids. And cognitive motivation can either be positive or negative. So positive motivation, where you identify the features and benefits of if the solution is enacted, this is what it will be. And negative motivation is where you identify the fear appeal, even the cognitive dissonance that occurs. Depending on your argument, I can't tell you whether positive or negative motivation is a better visualization to have, but choose either or. You can't have both. That would then, it just doesn't make sense. It sort of counteracts each other. You could only have one, either positive or negative. So please choose one of those cognitive visualizations and make sure it's not just a repeat of what you said in the problem or solution. In other words, don't say things like, if we don't fix it, mass shootings are going to be really, really bad. They're going to get even worse. You need to create something that really, if it's negative motivation, really creates that fear or that dissonance for your audience. And I'll let you choose how you do that. Then we now transition, link to the conclusion. And this is the 5th step in Alan Monroe, and that's typically where we would finish And if you're at 6 minutes, you certainly would finish on this action step. And this is the culmination of your speech. This is where you identify what your audience can do right now to be part of the solution you have identified. You see why having only one problem, one solution now becomes really important. If you have so many problems, so many solutions, there's so many actions you're going to have to come up with, nobody is going to be persuaded. So make it simple, simple, simple. If there's only one or even alternate type of action I can do, yeah, I'm probably going to do it. I will be persuaded, or more likely, more persuaded to do it. So I would suggest have a very obvious action. That's your primary persuasion that you want your audience to do right now to be part of the problem. And since it has to relate directly to your satisfaction step, if the satisfaction in this case, this example is restricting gun ownership, then obviously that is a legal matter. So you'd write to your senators, your congresspeople, et cetera, et cetera. And I would suggest that you give very specific information. Do it from your region of the world, state, city, etc. Give us who your senator or congressperson or whoever it is that you want us to write to. Details, or call the telephone number. That would probably be a good thing. But give us all of the content that we need to know so that we can immediately go do that which we need to do. And then give an alternate version. An alternate would be, if you can't do the first one for whatever reason, here's something else you could do. Let me give you another topic that may make that a little easier to understand. Let's say, for example, we talk about problem of euthanasia of domesticated animals in America. It's a huge amount of dogs and cats, for example, are euthanized every year. So a solution to that would be to only adopt from no-kill shelters. That's your solution. And maybe what you want to do here is your primary one would be to go and adopt now from your local humane society or no-kill shelter. Now, of course, not everybody can adopt. I mean, maybe they've got a new baby or something. They live in an apartment where there's no animals allowed. There could be a plethora of reasons why they're not right. They may want to, but they just can't adopt. And this is why giving an alternate action really does help out. So maybe the alternate action is, if you can't adopt, could you donate just a small amount, whether it's $1 or $2, $5, $10, whatever you can easily afford. If you can donate to a no-kill shelter, that just helps that no-kill shelter help even more animals. This is two very different actions, relatively simple, and you give us all the specific details in those actions so we can go do either one or even both right there and then. But have two actions, the primary one and an alternate one. Now that would ordinarily be where you would finish your speech. And if you're at 6 minutes, that is where you would end. However, you should always over-prepare. You never know if, the spirits got you as you were preparing and doing your actual recording of the speech, and you finished at 5.5 minutes. Well, no problem, because you've over-prepared now a general conclusion. This is something that you have tucked away in your pocket, and you only pull it out if you need to. Sometimes, let's say you're on stage, and the event planner at the back of the room suddenly realizes the problem, and they do this sort of stretching out sign, and maybe you throw up a couple of fingers, and that's telling you you've got to stretch for a couple more minutes. You have to put more content in. This is very real world, right? So no problem, because you have over-prepared content. You have it if you need it, and if you don't need it, it stays neatly tucked away, and your audience is no the wiser. But they do leave with, wow, that speaker was really good. They really respected our time. So general conclusion, have those 3 pieces of information: review, you summarize your main points, which would be primarily your problem, solution, and action. And then restate your position on this topic, and close with a memorable statement, right? That's what I call a Jerry Springer moment, that soliloquy you give that just brings the whole speech together, making sense. And so that's what you would do for this speech. It takes a lot more preparation, takes a lot more practice, but you definitely can do this speech quite well. I've got full faith in you guys. A couple of the rules just to make sure we're all on the same page. As I mentioned, a minimum of 4 references. They must be credible. They don't necessarily have to be peer reviewed, but they have to be credible. No blogs, wikis, cliff notes, things like that. Those would not be considered credible at all. I'm not saying that the information is not correct. They're just not considered very credible. So please provide a minimum of 4 references in APA format and cite those references above in the outline where it is appropriate. Remember, in APA format, you must have a citation that corresponds to a reference. If you don't have an in-text citation, then you cannot have the reference. If you have a reference, you must have a citation. So they go hand in hand, peanut butter and jelly, gotta have them. And you are also required to have visual aids. Now, your text explains exactly what visual aids comprise, so please make sure you read up on that. But you need to have 3. And the whole point of visual aids is to enhance your presentation. They don't speak on your behalf. They don't replace the speaker, but they enhance what the speaker is saying. So please incorporate 3 visual aids at 3 different times in your presentation where appropriate. Do not start with all 3 and do not end with all 3. That just wouldn't enhance really what you're saying. Okay, but you do need to have a minimum of 3 visual aids. Just a few other things. Please make sure this outline is done by Sunday, midnight week 3. So that's Eastern Standard Time, 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. There's no extension to that deadline. If you would like me to review, then please make sure you submit by Friday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. These take a long time to grade, so give me time to actually review it, get back to you, and if there are further corrections that you need to make, you can still do it and resubmit by the deadline. Corrections after the deadline are not accepted. 6 minutes is your timing for this. It goes quickly. It goes really, really quickly. There's lots to do with this. 3 visual aids. Again, extemporaneous delivery only. Absolutely no reading. This is not a reading class. This is not an acting class. You're not memorizing lines. You have to present content. So only extemporaneous delivery. I must be able to clearly see and hear you. Please stand. Go back to those that PowerPoint I sent you on speech requirements. If you have any question as to how you are to do the video audio recording. And for those of you who are not presenting in Cultura Live, please make sure you have a minimum of 2 adult audience members. That's 18 or above, those people who have ratiocinative processes who can actively provide pertinent critique of your performance, both good and bad. And that's why it must be adults. So 2 adults, always remember, please make sure you show them at the beginning and end, have them wave at the camera, they can walk past, you could pan to them, but do that at the beginning and the end of your recording. All right, any questions, please just reach out to me, email me, or under the Ask Questions tab in the discussion board. Correctly title that, don't just put question in, but put an appropriate topic title, and that way everybody knows what that question's about. And if they have the same question, they can just read the answer there. That's the whole point of that. I think that is about it for the Monroe Motivational Sequence. I look forward to your speeches. Thank you, everybody.